My cheating husband cut me off from everyone I loved for a decade, convincing me that my family was toxic and my friends were jealous of our perfect life in suburban Ohio. Last Tuesday, while cleaning his home office, I found a shoebox with 47 birthday cards, letters, and photos from my mother, my sister, even my childhood best friend Sarah, all intercepted and hidden. The shoebox was dusty, shoved behind old tax returns in the bottom drawer of his mahogany desk. My hands shook as I lifted the lid. The first card showed a watercolor garden scene, my mother's handwriting immediately recognizable. "Happy 30th birthday, sweetheart. We miss you terribly. Please call us." Dated 3 years ago. I never received it. Never knew she tried to reach me on that milestone birthday when I sat alone in our kitchen, convincing myself that their silence proved Luke right about them not caring. Beneath that card, another and another. Birthday wishes, holiday greetings, photos of my nephew's first day of school, a child I'd never met because Luke said my sister was manipulative and trying to create drama, a letter from Sarah detailing her wedding, asking me to be her maid of honor. "I know things got weird after you married Luke, but you're still my best friend. I don't understand what happened to us." That letter was 5 years old. 5 years of believing she'd abandoned our friendship when she'd been reaching out the entire time. My throat constricted as I pulled out a photograph, edges worn from handling. My mother, visibly older, standing beside my father's grave. The back read, "Dad's funeral, March 2019. We looked for you everywhere. We thought you'd want to say goodbye. I'd known nothing about my father's death. Luke had monitored my phone, my email, intercepted the mail. He'd stolen my chance to grieve, to attend my own father's funeral." The truth crystallized with brutal clarity. For 10 years, I'd lived in an isolation chamber of Luke's construction. He'd systematically dismantled every relationship I valued, replacing them with his narrative of their rejection, their toxicity, their supposed cruelty, and I'd believed him. God, I'd believed every poisonous word. I'd met Luke when I was 27, working at a marketing firm in Cleveland. He was a regional sales director, confident and attentive. Our courtship felt like a whirlwind romance from a movie. He surprised me with flowers, listened intently when I talked about my dreams, seemed genuinely interested in my close relationship with my family and friends. "You're so lucky to have such strong bonds," he'd said during our third date. "That's rare." The changes started gradually after our wedding. "Your mom seems a bit controlling, don't you think?" he'd mentioned casually. "She called 3 times this week. That's excessive." When I'd defend her, he'd backtrack, apologize, say he just wanted us to have time as newlyweds without outside interference. It seemed reasonable then. Loving, even. 6 months into marriage, he suggested we move from Cleveland to a suburb 40 minutes away. "Better schools for when we have kids," he explained. A fresh start for us. The distance made spontaneous visits from my family difficult. When my sister complained about the drive, Luke pointed it out. "See? She's not willing to make an effort for you." When Sarah mentioned she couldn't come to our housewarming because she had a work commitment, Luke shook his head sadly. "Real friends make time, Anna." He'd check my phone regularly, framing it as playful curiosity. "Who are you texting?" he'd ask with a smile. If I hesitated, his smile would falter. "We shouldn't have secrets in a marriage, should we?" The guilt would flood through me. He was right. Healthy couples were transparent. I started showing him my messages unprompted, proving I had nothing to hide. The isolation accelerated when he convinced me to quit my job. "We don't need the money, and I make enough for both of us," he'd argued. "Wouldn't it be nice to focus on the house? On us? You're always so stressed from work." Without my office, I lost daily contact with colleagues who'd become friends. Luke had opinions about each of them anyway. "Lisa seems fake. I don't trust her. Did you notice how Rick looks at you? That's inappropriate." One by one, I stopped making plans with coworkers, accepting Luke's assessment that they weren't genuine friends. My mother's calls became arguments. She sensed something wrong, asked questions that made Luke defensive. "She's trying to interfere in our marriage," he'd say after these conversations. "She can't let you go. Can't accept you're an adult with your own family now." When I'd attempt to maintain the relationship, he'd go silent for days, punishing me with cold distance until I apologized for prioritizing her over him. The final severance happened 2 years into our marriage. My sister showed up unannounced, concerned about how rarely she heard from me. Luke answered the door, told her I wasn't home, said I'd specifically mentioned not wanting to see her. When I found out days later, I confronted him. He seemed hurt, confused. She was drunk, Anna, banging on our door at 9 a.m, making a scene for the neighbors. I protected you from her chaos. He showed me a video on his phone, grainy footage of my sister on our doorstep, her body language agitated. I couldn't hear the audio, couldn't see the timestamp, but I trusted my husband over my lying eyes. That incident became the final straw in Luke's narrative. He suggested I write my family a letter, establishing boundaries, taking a break from their toxic behavior. He helped me draft it, his words flowing through my hand. The letter burned bridges with surgical precision. My mother called sobbing. I didn't answer. My sister sent dozens of texts. I blocked her number, Luke watching approvingly over my shoulder. The isolation should have felt suffocating, but Luke filled every space. He worked from home increasingly often, his presence constant. He planned our weekends, chose our friends, all couples from his office who nodded along with his observations about loyalty and family. We socialized only with people who reinforced his worldview. The echo chamber was complete. I'd catch myself sometimes late at night, wondering if I'd made a mistake cutting everyone off. But Luke would sense my doubt, pull me close, whisper about how proud he was that I'd chosen our marriage over their manipulation. "It's us against the world," he'd say. "That's how it should be." Now, kneeling on his office floor, surrounded by evidence of his decade-long deception, I understood the truth. It had never been them against me. It had been him against them, and I'd been his unwitting weapon in destroying my own support system. I photographed every card, every letter, every piece of evidence, 47 items representing countless moments of love I'd been denied. My phone's camera roll filled with proof of Luke's systematic cruelty. Then I carefully returned everything to the shoebox exactly as I'd found it, sliding it back behind the tax returns. He couldn't know I'd discovered his secret. Not yet. Walking into our pristine kitchen, I pulled out my laptop from the cabinet where I kept it. Luke monitored my activity, but I'd learned years ago how to clear browser history, how to appear compliant while maintaining tiny pockets of privacy. I created a new email account he didn't know about, using the library's public computer last month when I'd told him I was getting groceries. From this secret account, I sent a message to my mother's old email address, praying she still used it. "Mom, it's me. I know it's been years. I know you have every reason to never want to speak to me again, but something happened, and I need help. Can we meet? Please." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The waiting was agony. I cleaned obsessively, channeling my nervous energy into scrubbing baseboards Luke would never notice. Hours crawled past. Finally, around dinner time, my phone buzzed with an email notification. "Anna, oh my darling girl. Yes, anywhere, anytime. I've been waiting 10 years for this message. Tell me when and where." Tears blurred my vision as I typed coordinates for a coffee shop in the next town over. Somewhere Luke wouldn't think to look for me. Tomorrow, at 10. I'd tell him I had a dentist appointment. That night, Luke came home from his office with takeout and wine, oblivious to the earthquake trembling beneath his feet. He kissed my cheek, complained about a difficult client, asked what I'd done all day. I smiled and lied smoothly, the performance coming easier than it should have. Just cleaned. The usual. He didn't notice the slight tremor in my hands or the way I couldn't quite meet his eyes. As we ate, he talked about planning a vacation, just the two of us, maybe somewhere tropical. "You seem stressed lately," he observed. "We should get away, reconnect." I nodded, made appropriate sounds of agreement, while my mind raced with the knowledge of what he'd stolen from me. Every affectionate gesture felt like a violation now, knowing what I knew. After dinner, I excused myself to shower. Under the scalding water, I finally let myself cry, muffling the sounds against my forearm. 10 years. 10 years of birthdays and holidays spent believing no one cared, when really they'd been trying desperately to reach me. 10 years of my father's decline and death, experienced entirely without me. My nephew was 9 years old. I'd missed his entire childhood. The grief was overwhelming, but beneath it burned something else. Something cold and calculating. Luke had orchestrated this isolation with malicious precision. He'd intercepted 47 pieces of correspondence that I knew about. How many phone calls had he diverted? How many emails deleted? How many visitors turned away? I thought of the shoebox hidden in his office, his little trophy collection. He'd kept everything, a shrine to his successful manipulation. The arrogance of it staggered me. He'd been so confident in his control that he'd preserved evidence of his deception, probably reviewing it sometimes to marvel at his own cleverness. That night, lying beside him in our bed, I watched him sleep. His face was peaceful, handsome even, the face of the man I'd promised forever to. The face of the person who'd systematically destroyed every relationship I'd cherished. I felt nothing but contempt. Tomorrow I would see my mother for the first time in a decade. Tomorrow I would begin to understand the full extent of what Luke had taken from me. And tomorrow, I would start planning exactly how to make him pay for every stolen moment, every intercepted letter, every deliberately inflicted isolation. He shifted in his sleep, rolling toward me, his arm draping across my waist in a gesture that once would have felt comforting. Now it felt like chains. I carefully extracted myself, moving to the far edge of the mattress. The distance between us was barely 2 feet, but it represented a chasm that could never be bridged. Not after this. Not ever. The coffee shop was deliberately chosen, a small independent place in Hudson that Luke would never frequent. I arrived 15 minutes early, parking where I could see the entrance. My hands gripped the steering wheel as customers came and went. Each middle-aged woman made my heart jump until finally, at exactly 10 o'clock, I saw her. My mother looked older. The photos in the shoebox hadn't prepared me for the reality of her aged face. The silver threading through her dark hair, the deeper lines around her eyes. But when she spotted my car, when our eyes met through the windshield, her expression transformed into something so raw and hopeful that I nearly broke down right there. She was walking toward me before I'd even opened the door. When I stepped out, she stopped short, her hand covering her mouth. We stood there for a moment in the parking lot, 2 women separated by a decade of enforced silence, and then she was hugging me so tightly I could barely breathe. "My baby girl," she whispered against my hair. "My sweet girl. I thought I'd lost you forever." Inside the coffee shop, we claimed a corner booth away from other patrons. My mother ordered tea she didn't drink, her eyes never leaving my face. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photographs of the shoebox contents. Her face went through a progression of emotions. Confusion, then recognition, then something dark and terrible. "He kept them," she said finally, her voice hollow. "He intercepted our letters and kept them like trophies." "Tell me everything I missed," I said. "I need to know what he stole from me." She took a shaky breath. "Your father started showing symptoms of early onset dementia about 6 months after you cut us off. He declined rapidly. Toward the end, he'd ask for you constantly. Couldn't understand why you wouldn't visit. The day he died, your sister and I spent hours trying to reach you. We called the police for a wellness check, but Luke told them you were fine, just estranged from family by choice. They had no reason to question him. The coffee I'd ordered turned to acid in my stomach. My father had died confused and hurt, thinking I'd abandoned him in his final months. We hired a private investigator," she continued. "Spent thousands of dollars trying to understand what happened. The investigator confirmed you were alive, living in the suburbs with Luke, appeared healthy. He said there were no signs of physical abuse, that you seemed to go places, do normal activities, but always with Luke, never alone. He documented it all, but what could we do? You're an adult. You'd sent us that letter saying you wanted no contact. Legally, we had no recourse." What about Sarah? I asked. She got married 4 years ago, had a baby last year, a little girl she named after you, Anna Rose. She still talks about you, still hopes you'll come back into her life. My mother reached across the table, taking my hand. We all held on to hope. Your sister never removed you from her emergency contacts. I kept your room exactly as you left it. We celebrated your birthday every year, all of us together, keeping a place set for you at the table. The image destroyed me. While I'd sat alone on my birthdays, convinced they'd forgotten me, they'd been gathering in my absence, maintaining space for me in their lives. There's something else, my mother said carefully. About 3 years ago, a woman named Quinn contacted us through Facebook. She said she'd been married to Luke before you, that he'd done the same thing to her, isolated her from everyone she knew, controlled every aspect of her life. She said she finally escaped when she found evidence he was having an affair. She tried to warn us about him, gave us her number in case we ever reached you. My vision tunneled. He was married before? She said they were together for 7 years before she discovered the truth. She lost relationships with her entire family because of him, and when she tried to reconnect after leaving him, some bridges couldn't be rebuilt. Her father had died believing she'd chosen Luke over him. My mother squeezed my hand tighter. She wanted you to know you weren't alone, that his pattern is deliberate and calculated. I pulled out a notebook. My hand's steadier now. I need her number. I need to know everything about his methods, his patterns. And Mom, I need you to trust me when I say I can't just leave. Not yet. He has to believe everything is normal. My mother's expression shifted to concern. Anna, if he's dangerous, he's not physically violent, I interrupted. His cruelty is more sophisticated than that. But I need you to understand something. I'm not running away. I'm going to dismantle everything he built, piece by piece, the same way he dismantled my life. I'm going to make sure he loses everything that matters to him. Something flickered in my mother's eyes. Recognition, maybe, or approval. What do you need from us? We spent the next 2 hours planning. My mother would be my connection point to everyone Luke had severed me from. She'd coordinate with my sister, with Sarah, with Quinn. They'd all remain invisible to Luke while helping me document his pattern of abuse. The private investigator they'd hired years ago was still available, now working to build a case rather than simply observe. Before we parted, my mother pulled a thumb drive from her purse. This has copies of everything we tried to send you over the years. Photos, videos, letters. Your sister's wedding video is on here. Your nephew's birthday parties. Your father's final lucid day when he recorded a message for you, telling you he loved you and hoped you'd come home soon. I clutched the drive like a lifeline. I'll watch them tonight while he's asleep. Be careful, she whispered. Men like Luke don't let go easily. I'm counting on that, I replied. Driving home, I stopped at a storage facility and rented a small unit under my maiden name, paying cash. The thumb drive went into a fireproof box inside the unit, along with a burner phone my mother had given me. I was building an infrastructure Luke knew nothing about, creating spaces he couldn't access or control. Back at home, I resumed my performance of the compliant wife. Luke returned from work that evening full of enthusiasm about the tropical vacation he'd been researching. I found this resort in Costa Rica, he said, pulling up photos on his laptop. Private bungalows, all inclusive. We could go next month. I smiled and nodded while calculating. A vacation would be another opportunity for isolation, for reinforcing his control. Before my discovery, I would have gone eagerly. Now the thought of being trapped in a foreign country with him made my skin crawl. It looks beautiful, I said, but could we push it to spring? I've been thinking about taking a pottery class at the community center, and the session starts next month. His expression flickered with something cold before smoothing back into encouragement. A pottery class? That's great, honey. It'll be good for you to have a hobby. But I caught the calculation behind his eyes. He'd find a way to sabotage it, to make me feel guilty for prioritizing Clay over him, to slowly erode this small independence until I gave it up voluntarily. I thought so too, I said brightly. The instructor is male, though. which is a little awkward, but the class had good reviews. I was testing him, watching his reaction. Sure enough, his jaw tightened microscopically. A male instructor? For pottery? He laughed, but it sounded forced. That seems unusual. Are you sure this is the right class? You're probably right, I conceded, internally satisfied. I'll look for other options. His relief was palpable. Maybe something from home? There are great online tutorials. That way you could work on it when I'm at the office. Make it a surprise for me. Perfect. He was coaching me back into isolation without seeming controlling. I acted grateful for his suggestion, watched him relax as he believed he'd successfully redirected me back into the confines of our home. That night, after Luke fell asleep, I crept downstairs and used my secret email to contact Quinn, Luke's ex-wife. Her response came within an hour. "I've been waiting for someone to reach out," she wrote. I knew he'd do it again. "I'm so sorry you're going through this. Meet me tomorrow if you can. There are things you need to know about Luke that will help you protect yourself." We arranged to meet at a library in Akron, far enough from my suburb that I wouldn't risk being spotted. I'd tell Luke I was grocery shopping at the larger stores in that direction. The next morning, Quinn was waiting at a study table in the library's research section, surrounded by accordion folders. She was probably in her mid-40s, attractive in a tired way, like someone who'd fought hard battles and bore invisible scars. "You look just like your photos," she said quietly. "He showed me pictures of you near the end of our marriage. I thought he was planning to have an affair. I didn't realize he was planning to replace me entirely." She opened the first folder. Inside were bank statements, credit card bills, emails printed and highlighted. Luke is methodical. He follows the same pattern every time because it works. First, he establishes himself as the sole breadwinner. Then, he slowly restricts access to money. By the time I left him, I had no credit cards in my own name, no bank account he couldn't see. Nothing. I was completely financially dependent. I thought of my own situation. I'd closed my personal accounts after we married, consolidating everything into joint accounts that Luke managed. I had credit cards, but they were connected to his accounts. If I tried to leave, I'd have no financial resources. "He documents everything," Quinn continued. "Every purchase you make, every place you go. He's building a file to use against you if you ever try to leave. He'll paint you as unstable, dependent, incapable of managing your own life." She pulled out another folder, this one containing printouts of social media posts. After I left, he launched a campaign to destroy my reputation, told everyone I'd been unfaithful, mentally unstable, cruel to him. Half my friends believed him. My own mother questioned whether I was making up the isolation, whether I was just being dramatic about normal marital issues. "How did you get away?" I asked. I found proof of his affair, confronted him with it. He crumbled when faced with concrete evidence of his hypocrisy, got sloppy in his anger. I'd been quietly moving money into a hidden account for months, small amounts he wouldn't notice. When I left, I had enough for first and last month's rent, a security deposit. I slept on an air mattress for a year, rebuilding everything from nothing. She leaned forward intently. "But here's what I wish I'd known. Luke has money hidden. Accounts under his business name. Investments he doesn't report on your joint returns. I found evidence of it after our divorce was finalized, but by then it was too late to revisit the settlement. He walked away with significantly more than I realized. This information reshaped my entire understanding. Luke wasn't just controlling. He was financially fraudulent, hiding assets while claiming we needed to be careful with money. Quinn handed me a business card. "This is the forensic accountant who helped me discover the hidden money. She's expensive, but she's thorough. If you want to really hurt Luke, go after what he actually values, his wealth and his reputation." "Huh?" We talked for another hour, Quinn detailing Luke's patterns and weaknesses. He was vain, she explained, obsessed with appearing successful and magnanimous. His affair had been with a coworker who made him feel important and admired. He couldn't resist flattery, couldn't tolerate being seen as anything less than exceptional. "He'll make mistakes if his ego is stroked," Quinn said. "He'll get overconfident, reveal things he shouldn't. Use that. Driving home with folders hidden in my trunk, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't just gathering evidence anymore. I was building a strategy. Luke had spent 10 years constructing a prison of isolation around me. I was going to burn it down with him still inside. The pottery class became my cover story for everything. 3 times a week, I'd leave the house with a canvas bag and return with my hands deliberately dirty with clay I'd purchased at a craft store and applied in parking lots. Luke would smile indulgently, ask to see my progress. I'd show him lopsided bowls bought at thrift stores, claiming them as my amateur attempts. In reality, those 3 hours each week were spent building my case against him. I met with the forensic accountant Quinn had recommended, a sharp woman named Rochelle, who wore expensive suits and asked devastatingly precise questions about our finances. "Your husband has been diverting money for years," Rochelle confirmed after 2 weeks of investigation. "There's a business account under his LLC that he's funneling income into. Based on what I've uncovered so far, he's hidden approximately $400,000 from your joint assets." The number staggered me. I'd spent years believing we needed to be careful with money, that vacations had to be modest, that my requests for small luxuries were extravagant. Meanwhile, Luke had been stockpiling nearly $500,000 in accounts I didn't know existed. "Can we prove it?" I asked. "We can document it thoroughly. The question is what you want to do with the information." Rochelle studied me carefully. "Most of my clients use this evidence in divorce proceedings, but you don't seem interested in simply leaving your husband. You seem interested in destroying him." "He stole 10 years of my life," I said evenly. "He kept me isolated from everyone who loved me while pretending to be a devoted husband. He intercepted letters from my dying father. Yes, I want him destroyed." Rochelle smiled thinly. "Then we need to be strategic. The hidden money is likely tax fraud. The IRS would be very interested in unreported income. But if we report it now, he might get audited and come away with just penalties and back taxes. We need to build a larger case." She pulled out a timeline. "I need 3 more months to trace everything. Every account, every transaction, every instance of financial manipulation. Then we'll have enough to not only divorce him and claim your fair share, but to ensure he faces criminal charges for fraud." 3 months felt simultaneously too long and not long enough. I'd already been planning for 6 weeks, already felt the strain of maintaining my performance while rage burned beneath every smile. But Rochelle was right. Impatience would cost me the revenge I was methodically constructing. Meanwhile, I'd reconnected with my sister through carefully arranged meetings. Autumn was different from my memories. Harder somehow, but the moment we saw each other, years of separation crumbled. She'd brought my nephew, a bright 9-year-old who studied me with curious eyes. "Mom talks about you all the time," he said simply. "She said you were lost, but now you're found." My sister's eyes filled with tears. "I told him you'd been on a very long trip, that you were trying to find your way home. We sat in a park while my nephew played, and Autumn told me about the years I'd missed. Her struggles to conceive, the eventual miracle of pregnancy, the joy of motherhood shadowed by my absence. I wanted you there," she said. "Every major moment, every milestone I wanted my sister. I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry I believed his lies about you." "He was convincing," she acknowledged. "That letter you sent, the one cutting us off, it sounded like you. Your voice, your words. I couldn't reconcile the sister I knew with the person who'd written such cruel things. Mom kept saying something was wrong, that you were being controlled. I wanted to believe her, but the evidence suggested otherwise." I showed her some of the intercepted letters on my phone. Her face hardened as she scrolled through images of birthday cards and photos she'd sent that never reached me. "He's a monster," she said finally. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to take everything from him," I replied. "The same way he took everything from me." She nodded slowly. "Tell me how I can help." My sister became part of the team. She, my mother, and Sarah created a network of support that Luke remained completely unaware of. They'd document his movements when I needed alibis for where I'd been. They'd photograph me at various locations around town to establish that I had an independent life. building evidence that contradicted any future claims Luke might make about my dependence or instability. Sarah, when we finally reunited, cried so hard she could barely speak. We met at her house, her daughter napping upstairs, and spent hours catching up on a decade of lost time. "I thought you hated me," she admitted. "After the wedding invitation went unanswered, after you blocked me on everything, I thought I'd done something terrible to lose my best friend." "You did nothing wrong," I assured her. "Luke did everything." She showed me photos of her wedding, her daughter's birth, all the moments I should have been present for. "This is Anna," she said, pulling up a recent picture of a chubby toddler with dark curls. "I named her after you because even though you weren't in my life, you were still my best friend. I wanted my daughter to carry a piece of that friendship." The gesture broke something open inside me. While I'd existed in Luke's carefully constructed isolation, believing myself forgotten, people who loved me had been keeping me alive in their hearts and memories. They'd maintained space for me, waiting for the day I might return. Sarah's husband, Rick, worked in IT security. When I explained my situation, he offered to help me secure my digital life. "Luke has probably been monitoring your online activity," he said. "Email, social media, maybe even keylogging software on your computer. We need to create a clean digital environment he can't access." Rick set me up with encrypted email, a VPN for anonymous browsing, and taught me how to detect monitoring software. Sure enough, he found a program on my laptop that logged every keystroke and periodically sent reports to Luke's email. The discovery made my skin crawl. "How long has that been there?" I asked. "Based on the install date, approximately 8 years. 8 years of Luke reading every private thought I'd typed, every message I'd sent, every search I'd conducted." The violation was comprehensive and sickening. "Can you leave it active?" I asked Rick. "If I remove it, he'll know I found it." "We can feed it false information," Rick suggested. "I'll set up a clean system for your real activities, and we'll use the compromised laptop to make Luke think everything is normal." So I began a double digital life. On the monitored laptop, I browsed pottery tutorials and recipes. I sent innocuous emails to the fake email account I'd created, writing to a fictional friend named Jordan about my pottery class and plans for the house. Luke would see exactly what I wanted him to see. On my clean system, accessed only at the library or my storage unit, I coordinated with my team. I communicated with Rochelle about Luke's finances. I documented every instance of his controlling behavior in a detailed journal. I researched divorce attorneys and gathered evidence of his systematic isolation. At home, Luke remained oblivious to the infrastructure being built against him. He commented that I seemed happier lately, more relaxed. "The pottery class is really good for you," he observed one evening. "I'm glad I suggested it." I smiled and agreed, watching him preen at his supposed insight. His ego was his weakness, just as Quinn had warned. He believed himself so far superior to me that he couldn't conceive of me outsmarting him. His arrogance created opportunities. He'd leave his phone unlocked while showering, giving me minutes to photograph his messages and call logs. He'd discuss work calls on speaker while I was in the kitchen, not realizing I was recording every word about his business dealings. He'd leave his home office door open while working, confident I had no interest in his financial papers. I became a ghost in my own home, moving through spaces silently, observing everything, gathering ammunition. The shoebox remained untouched in his desk drawer, my discovery still his secret. Every day I didn't confront him about it was another day I could prepare my counterattack. The private investigator my mother had hired, a patient man named Vincent, began documenting Luke's movements outside work. The photographs he brought to our meetings were damning. Luke, supposedly at client dinners, photographed instead at bars with young women from his office. Luke, claiming to work late, captured leaving a hotel with a blonde I didn't recognize. "He's having an affair," Vincent confirmed. "Has been for at least 4 months with this particular woman, possibly longer. Her name is Chloe. She's 26. Works in his marketing department." The information should have devastated me. Instead, I felt only cold satisfaction. Luke had destroyed my connection to everyone who loved me while conducting affairs with women young enough to be his daughters. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. "Can you get proof of the affair that would hold up legally?" I asked Vincent. "I can do better than that," he replied. I can get you audio. She's been complaining to friends that he won't leave his wife. Says he keeps promising but never follows through. If I can get her talking about their relationship on record, you'll have everything you need. While Vincent worked on capturing audio evidence of the affair, Rochelle continued tracing Luke's hidden money. She discovered he'd been planning for years, creating an escape fund that would allow him to leave the marriage whenever he chose while leaving me with nothing. He's been moving money monthly into accounts you have no access to, she explained. If he initiated divorce proceedings right now, he'd claim your joint accounts represented all marital assets. You'd get half of very little while he walked away with hundreds of thousands hidden in his business entity. It's financial abuse disguised as legitimate business planning. But now we have documentation, I said. Comprehensive documentation, Rochelle confirmed. Bank statements, transfer records, business filings that don't match tax returns. The IRS will be fascinated by the discrepancies. So will divorce courts. As winter approached, I'd been secretly planning for 3 months. My network was extensive now. My mother, sister, Sarah, Quinn, Rick, Rochelle, and Vincent, all working in coordination to build an inescapable case against Luke. I had evidence of financial fraud, infidelity, systematic isolation, and emotional abuse, documented thoroughly enough to destroy him in every arena that mattered. But I needed the perfect moment. The revelation had to be public and devastating. It had to strip away his carefully constructed image and expose him as the manipulative fraud he'd always been. And it had to happen in a way that gave him no opportunity to spin the narrative or play the victim. The opportunity presented itself in mid-November, when Luke announced we were hosting Thanksgiving dinner. I invited some colleagues and their wives, he said. About 20 people. It'll be good for networking, and everyone will love seeing our home. He'd never hosted events at our house before. This was about showing off, about demonstrating his successful marriage and beautiful home to people who admired him. He wanted to parade our relationship as evidence of his perfect life. That sounds wonderful, I said, already calculating. I'll make sure everything is perfect. I knew I could count on you, Luke replied, kissing my forehead. You're such a good wife. I smiled at him, thinking of the 47 intercepted letters in his desk drawer, the hidden bank accounts, the affair with Chloe, the decade of systematic isolation. I try, I said sweetly. That night, I emailed my team. Thanksgiving dinner at our house. 20 guests, all Luke's colleagues and their spouses. This is our moment. My mother replied first, Tell me what you need. I began composing the most important list of my life. Every item was a weapon. Every detail was carefully chosen to maximize Luke's humiliation, because I wasn't just going to reveal his deceptions at this dinner. I was going to orchestrate his complete annihilation in front of everyone who'd admired him. The countdown had begun. Luke had 3 weeks left of believing himself safe. 3 weeks before his carefully constructed world collapsed with such totality that he'd never recover. And he had no idea it was coming. The 3 weeks before Thanksgiving passed in a controlled frenzy of preparation. Luke, thrilled with what he perceived as my enthusiastic embrace of his networking event, gave me his credit card and encouraged me to spare no expense. Make it memorable, he instructed. I want people talking about this dinner for years. Oh, it'll definitely be memorable, I assured him. I spent his money lavishly, ordered premium catering from Cleveland's most expensive restaurant, hired servers and a bartender, rented elegant table settings and centerpieces, purchased an elaborate floral arrangement for the entryway. Luke beamed at each expense report, proud of the impressive event taking shape. What he didn't know was that I'd also spent my own carefully hidden resources. $5,000 from the storage unit where I'd been stashing grocery money for months went to Vincent for his final investigation push. Another $2,000 went to Rochelle for expedited documentation of Luke's financial fraud. The rest covered costs Luke would never see itemized: professionally printed packets containing evidence of his crimes, sealed envelopes prepared for specific guests, and a backup plan if anything went wrong. The guest list became my weapon. Luke had invited 8 couples from his company, along with his regional director and the company's CFO. All of them believed Luke was the successful, devoted husband he portrayed himself as. None of them knew about the hidden money, the affairs, or the systematic abuse that had defined our marriage. I added 3 names to the catering company's server list: my sister, Sarah, and Quinn. Dressed in the catering company's uniform with their hair styled differently, they'd be nearly invisible to Luke's colleagues while positioned perfectly to help execute the evening's plan. The day before Thanksgiving, Chloe from Luke's office called our home phone. I answered, my voice bright and welcoming. "Hello? Oh, I'm sorry," she stammered. "I was trying to reach Luke's cell. I must have dialed the wrong number." "This is Luke's wife, Anna," I said pleasantly. "Can I take a message?" The silence on her end was profound. "No, I'll just text him. Sorry to bother you." "Wait," I said quickly. "Chloe, right? Luke mentioned you work in marketing. You should come to our Thanksgiving dinner tomorrow. We'd love to have you." Another long pause. "I don't think that's appropriate." "Nonsense," I insisted warmly. "Luke speaks so highly of you." "I insist. Come at 6. Bring a date if you'd like." I hung up before she could refuse again, then sent Luke a text. "Invited your colleague Chloe to dinner tomorrow. Hope that's okay. You mentioned she doesn't have family nearby." Luke's response came within minutes. "That's thoughtful of you, but she probably won't come. We'll see," I replied. That evening, Vincent delivered his final report. He'd captured audio of Chloe describing Luke's promises to leave me, detailing their affair with explicit clarity. He'd photographed them together at a hotel twice in the past week alone. And he'd discovered Luke had been conducting affairs serially for years, each one following the same pattern. Young women from his company, relationships lasting 4 to 8 months before he moved on to new targets. "He's a predator," Vincent said bluntly. "Uses his position of authority to pressure subordinates into relationships. I found 3 previous affairs, all with women in junior positions who've since left the company." I spoke with one of them off the record. She said Luke implied her career advancement depended on keeping him happy. This was more than financial fraud and emotional abuse. This was workplace sexual coercion. The evidence Vincent had gathered could end Luke's career even before the financial crimes came to light. Thanksgiving morning arrived cold and bright. Luke was energetic, excited about the evening ahead. He dressed carefully in an expensive sweater and slacks, styling his hair with particular attention. "This is going to be great for my career," he told me. "The regional director coming to our home for dinner shows how much he values my contributions to the company." "I'm sure tonight will exceed everyone's expectations," I agreed. The catering staff arrived at 3 to begin setup. My sister, Sarah, and Quinn wore identical black pants and white shirts, blending seamlessly with the legitimate servers. We'd rehearsed the evening's sequence during 3 secret meetings at Sarah's house, timing everything precisely. Luke greeted the real catering manager enthusiastically, shaking his hand and expressing appreciation for their service. He walked through the house, inspecting the table settings and bar setup, completely missing the 3 additional servers arranging wine glasses in the dining room. At 5:30, Luke showered and changed into a suit. He emerged looking polished and confident, every inch the successful professional. Looking at him, no one would suspect the depths of his manipulation and fraud. That was the point of tonight, to strip away the facade completely. Guests began arriving at 6. Luke's colleagues and their wives, dressed in cocktail attire, complemented our home's decor and the impressive spread of appetizers. The regional director arrived precisely at 6:15 with his wife, a woman who introduced herself as Patricia, and immediately engaged me in conversation about the floral arrangements. "You have exquisite taste," she said warmly. "Luke is lucky to have such a talented wife." "Luke is lucky in many ways," I replied with a smile. At 6:30, I retreated to the kitchen where my sister stood arranging appetizer trays. "She's here," Autumn whispered, gesturing toward the front window. Chloe had arrived. She stood on the doorstep wearing a conservative black dress, her blonde hair pulled back severely. She looked terrified. Luke answered the door, and I watched through the kitchen doorway as his face went through a rapid series of expressions: shock, panic, and finally forced pleasantness. "Chloe, what a surprise," he said with manufactured enthusiasm. "Come in, please." She entered hesitantly, clutching a bottle of wine. "Your wife invited me," I probably shouldn't have come. Of course you should have, I said, appearing from the kitchen with a warm smile. Luke speaks so highly of you. Let me take your coat. Luke's eyes met mine over Chloe's head, and I saw the first flicker of genuine fear. He was beginning to realize something was wrong, that I'd orchestrated Chloe's presence deliberately, but he couldn't make a scene, couldn't refuse her entry without raising questions. He was trapped by his own need to maintain appearances. Dinner was served at 7. The dining room table seated 22 people elegantly, with Luke positioned at the head and me at the foot. Our guests arranged along both sides. Chloe had been placed deliberately across from Luke and beside the regional director's wife, Patricia. The seating arrangement was no accident. The meal progressed through multiple courses. Luke made toasts, told charming stories about work successes, played the perfect host. His colleagues laughed at his jokes, their wives complimented the food, and the evening appeared to be exactly the successful networking event he'd envisioned. Until dessert, Sarah, dressed as a server, approached my seat and whispered loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "Ma'am, there's a package that was just delivered. The courier says it's urgent and needs your signature." I excused myself from the table, returning moments later with a large envelope. "How strange," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "It's addressed to all of us." I held up the envelope, showing the label. "To the colleagues and friends of Luke Walsh." Luke's fork clattered against his plate. "Anna, that's probably just some promotional material. Let's open it after dinner." "But it says urgent," I replied innocently. "And it's addressed to everyone here. Maybe it's something important about your company?" I broke the seal before he could protest further. Inside were 22 identical packets, professionally bound with clear covers. I began distributing them around the table, my sister and Quinn assisting. Each guest received their own copy. "What is this?" the regional director asked, opening his packet. "Documentation," I replied clearly, "of Luke's hidden bank accounts, unreported income, systematic tax fraud, and serial affairs with subordinate employees." The silence was immediate and absolute. Every eye at the table turned to me, then to the packets, then to Luke, whose face had drained of all color. "This is insane," Luke said, his voice strangled. "Anna, what are you doing?" "I'm revealing the truth," I said calmly. "The first section of your packets contains bank statements showing approximately $400,000 in unreported income funneled through Luke's personal LLC. The second section contains testimony from a forensic accountant confirming this constitutes tax fraud. The third section contains photographic evidence of Luke's affair with Chloe, who's sitting right there, as well as documentation of 3 previous affairs with junior employees at your company." Chloe made a small sound of distress. Luke's regional director was rapidly flipping through pages, his expression darkening with each one. "The fourth section," I continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "contains copies of 47 letters, cards, and photos that Luke intercepted over the past 10 years to keep me isolated from my family and friends. The fifth section contains testimony from Luke's previous wife about his identical pattern of abuse during their marriage." "Stop it," Luke said, standing abruptly. "Everyone, please ignore this. My wife is having some kind of breakdown. She's not well." "I'm perfectly well," I replied. "In fact, I've never been clearer." The final section of your packets contains documentation of Luke's systematic isolation tactics, including monitoring software he installed on my computer to track my every keystroke, financial manipulation to ensure my complete dependence, and the interception of mail, including letters from my dying father. Patricia, the regional director's wife, was openly crying as she read about the intercepted letters. Other guests looked between their packets, and Luke with expressions ranging from horror to disgust. "The forensic accountant's report has been filed with the IRS," I continued. "The evidence of workplace affairs is being sent to your company's Human Resources Department tomorrow, and copies of everything have been provided to my divorce attorney. Luke will be served with papers on Monday." Luke was shaking now, his carefully constructed composure completely shattered. "You can't do this," he whispered. "I already did," I replied. "You spent 10 years convincing me I was alone, that no one loved me, that I was lucky to have you. You kept my father's letters from me while he was dying. You intercepted birthday cards and wedding invitations. You monitored my computer, controlled my finances, and systematically destroyed every relationship I cherished. And you thought you were so much smarter than me that I'd never figure it out. The regional director stood, his face granite. Luke, consider yourself on administrative leave pending investigation. I'll need you to turn in your company laptop and access cards Monday morning. This is a misunderstanding. Luke tried desperately. Those bank accounts are legitimate business expenses. The forensic report disagrees, I interrupted. As does the IRS agent who's been reviewing your case for the past week. Luke turned to his colleagues, seeking support, finding only accusation and disgust in their faces. Chloe was crying openly now, Patricia comforting her while shooting Luke looks of pure contempt. You're destroying my life, Luke said, turning back to me with something dangerous in his eyes. No, I corrected. I'm revealing the life you actually lived while pretending to be someone decent. There's a difference. He lunged toward me then, rage finally overriding his social conditioning. Vincent, positioned by the kitchen door in a server's uniform, stepped forward and caught Luke's arm. I wouldn't, Vincent said calmly. Everything tonight is being recorded. An assault witnessed by 20 people would be a poor addition to your existing legal troubles. Luke sagged, the fight draining out of him as reality set in. His career was over. His marriage was over. His carefully hidden money had been discovered and reported. His affairs were exposed. Every piece of his constructed identity had been systematically dismantled in front of the people whose respect he most craved. Get out of my house, I said quietly. Pack a bag and leave. The locks will be changed tomorrow and you're not welcome back. This is my house too, he protested weakly. Actually, Rochelle said, entering from the kitchen where she'd been observing everything. Given the documented financial fraud and hidden assets, a judge will likely grant Anna exclusive occupancy during divorce proceedings, especially given the evidence of emotional abuse and systematic isolation. I'd recommend you leave voluntarily rather than being forcibly removed. Luke looked around the table one final time, seeing only condemnation and rejection. Then he stumbled from the room. We heard his footsteps on the stairs, the sounds of drawers being opened and closed, and finally the front door slamming. The dinner guests sat in stunned silence until Patricia spoke. My God, Anna, how long have you been planning this? 3 months, I replied, since I found the shoebox full of intercepted letters in his office. One of the wives started applauding, then another. Within moments, the entire table was clapping, some guests standing. It was the strangest Thanksgiving dinner in history, but also the most liberating moment of my life. The aftermath of Thanksgiving dinner unfolded with devastating precision over the following weeks. The 20 guests who'd witnessed Luke's exposure became the nucleus of a gossip network that spread through his professional community like wildfire. By Monday morning, everyone at his company had heard detailed accounts of the dinner, the evidence packets, and Luke's complete humiliation. The regional director moved swiftly. Luke was terminated for violation of workplace ethics policies before the IRS investigation even officially began. 3 women from his department, emboldened by the exposure of his affair with Chloe, filed formal complaints about inappropriate behavior and quid pro quo pressure for relationships. The company, terrified of lawsuits, settled with all 3 women and launched an internal investigation that revealed Luke had been falsifying expense reports for years. Rochelle's forensic work proved even more damaging than anticipated. The IRS agent assigned to Luke's case discovered the hidden accounts were just the beginning. Luke had been running a sophisticated tax evasion scheme for over a decade, underreporting income, claiming fraudulent business expenses, and using his LLC to shelter money that should have been declared as personal income. The estimated back taxes, penalties, and interest totaled over $600,000. He's financially destroyed, Rochelle informed me during a meeting at her office 2 weeks after Thanksgiving. The IRS has frozen his accounts pending investigation. The company terminated his severance package due to the fraud, and the divorce proceedings will expose every hidden asset, meaning he'll have to liquidate everything to cover his tax debt. What about the house? I asked. Jointly owned, but given the documented abuse and the fact that you've been the primary occupant while he's been living in a motel, the judge granted you exclusive possession pending divorce finalization. Eventually, it'll be sold and proceeds divided. But that won't be for at least a year given the complexity of the financial investigation. I thought of Luke's pristine home office, his carefully curated space of control. I donated his desk to charity the day after he left, the shoebox of intercepted letters going with me to the storage unit where I'd built my case against him. The room was being converted into a studio for the pottery I'd actually started learning. My mother had moved in temporarily, helping me navigate the emotional aftermath of everything. She was there the morning Luke's attorney tried to negotiate a settlement that would have given him access to some of the hidden money. We declined immediately. Let him have nothing, my mother said firmly. He deserves nothing. The criminal investigation expanded when one of Luke's former affairs came forward with allegations of sexual coercion. Chloe, devastated by her exposure at the dinner, had reached out to other women Luke had targeted. They'd formed their own network, comparing experiences and documenting a pattern of predatory behavior that spanned Luke's entire career. Vincent delivered updates on Luke's deteriorating situation weekly. He's living in an extended stay motel near the highway, Vincent reported during one meeting. Can't afford anything better with his accounts frozen. He's been applying for jobs, but word about the tax fraud and workplace affairs has spread. No one in his industry will touch him. The social destruction was equally comprehensive. Luke's friends, almost all colleagues or professional contacts, had abandoned him completely. His reputation in suburban social circles was annihilated. The story of the Thanksgiving dinner had become legendary, repeated at holiday parties and gatherings throughout December, as a cautionary tale about hidden abuse and spectacular downfalls. My reconnection with my family deepened as Luke's influence vanished. My sister's son, my nephew, had started calling me Aunt Anna and asking when I'd come to his basketball games. Sarah's daughter, little Anna, was learning to say my name. My mother had helped me sort through the items Luke left behind, carefully packing anything valuable for the asset division, while donating his clothes and personal effects to charity. I don't want him to have anything from this house, I told her. Nothing that would give him comfort or connection to the life he thought he'd built. Christmas approached, and for the first time in a decade, I spent it with my family. We gathered at my sister's house, the one where my father's memorial photos still hung in the hallway. My mother had brought photo albums, and we spent hours going through pictures from the years I'd missed. "This was your father's last birthday," my mother said softly, showing me a photo of Dad wearing a party hat, looking frail but happy. "He asked about you. Wanted to know if you'd call. We told him you would soon, that you were just busy. I'm sorry I wasn't there," I whispered. "You're here now," she replied. "That's what matters." The divorce proceedings moved forward through January and February. Luke's attorney kept trying to negotiate, seeking any settlement that would preserve some dignity or assets for his client. My attorney, a formidable woman named Helena who specialized in high-asset divorces, rejected every offer. "He hid $400,000, Helena said during one strategy meeting. "He committed tax fraud. He systematically isolated you. We're not negotiating with someone who deserves compromise. We're ensuring he pays for every single thing he did." The final hearing was scheduled for March, a frigid morning when I walked into the courthouse flanked by Helena, my mother, and my sister. Luke sat at the defendant's table looking gaunt and diminished, his expensive suit hanging loose on a frame that had lost 20 pounds. His attorney looked exhausted, probably from trying to defend the indefensible. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, had reviewed all the evidence in advance. She questioned Luke directly about the intercepted letters. "Mr. Walsh, you kept correspondence from your wife's dying father? You intercepted birthday cards and wedding invitations for a decade? I thought I was protecting her from toxic relationships," Luke said weakly. "By monitoring her computer? By hiding money? By conducting affairs while claiming marital devotion?" The judge's tone could have frozen nitrogen. "Your behavior represents a level of manipulation and control that borders on criminal. The emotional abuse you inflicted on Mrs. Walsh is thoroughly documented and deeply disturbing." The judge awarded me 70% of all marital assets, including Luke's claim to the house. She ordered him to pay my attorney fees and granted a permanent restraining order preventing him from contacting me or my family. The hidden money was divided, with most going to me as compensation for the years of financial abuse. Mr. Walsh, you will also be responsible for all back taxes, penalties, and interest owed to the IRS. The judge continued. This court finds your financial fraud was deliberate and sustained. You showed no remorse for any of your actions until you were caught. You systematically destroyed your wife's support network to maintain control over her. The cruelty you displayed is remarkable in its calculation. Luke's shoulders slumped as the judge read the final terms. When she dismissed us, he remained seated, staring at nothing while his attorney gathered papers. I walked out of the courthouse into early spring sunshine. My mother and sister flanked me, their presence a reminder of what I'd reclaimed: family, connection, love that wasn't contingent on control or manipulation. How do you feel? Autumn asked. Free, I said simply. That evening, my support network gathered at Sarah's house to celebrate. Quinn was there, having flown in from Seattle where she'd rebuilt her life after her own escape from Luke. Vincent brought his wife. Rochelle arrived with champagne. Rick showed me photos of little Anna taking her first steps. My mother held court in the kitchen, preparing food for everyone who'd helped orchestrate Luke's downfall. To Anna, Quinn said, raising her glass, who did what I never could, made him pay for everything. To justice, Helena added, and to knowing your worth, to family. My mother said softly, the ones we're born into and the ones we choose. We toasted and laughed, sharing stories about the investigation and the spectacular Thanksgiving dinner that had started Luke's destruction. Someone suggested we make it an annual tradition, inviting everyone who'd helped bring him down. The idea was simultaneously absurd and perfect. Later, as guests were leaving, Quinn pulled me aside. You know he's broken, she said. Completely destroyed. Does it feel like enough? I thought about the question carefully. Luke had lost his career, his money, his reputation, his marriage, and any hope of professional recovery. He'd face years of IRS scrutiny and would likely never work in his field again. His name had become synonymous with predatory behavior and fraud. Every person who'd once admired him now knew the truth about his manipulations. It's not about feeling like enough, I finally answered. It's about consequences matching actions. He stole 10 years of my life. He kept me from saying goodbye to my father. He destroyed relationships I can never fully recover. His suffering doesn't undo any of that. But it does mean he can't do it to anyone else. And yes, that feels exactly right. Quinn nodded, understanding in her eyes. I'm proud of you, she said. You did what I was too afraid to do. You survived, I reminded her. That took its own kind of courage. The house gradually emptied, until only my mother and I remained. We sat in Sarah's living room, surrounded by evidence of the full life my best friend had built, the life I'd missed but was now part of again. Your father would be proud, my mother said. He always said you had steel in your spine, even when you couldn't see it yourself. I wish I could tell him I'm sorry, I said. That I believed Luke's lies about all of you. He knew you loved him, she assured me. Even at the end, confused as he was, he knew that. He never blamed you. He just missed you. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, two women who'd survived different versions of loss and found their way back to each other. What happens now? My mother finally asked. Now I rebuild, I said. The house will sell eventually, and I'll find something smaller. I'm thinking about going back to school, maybe getting a degree in social work. I want to help other people recognize the signs of coercive control before they lose years like I did. That's beautiful, my mother said, turning your pain into purpose. Someone did that for me, I replied. Thinking of Quinn's bravery in reaching out to my family years ago, I want to pay that forward. 8 months after the divorce finalized, I stood in the empty shell of what had been Luke's house. The final walkthrough before closing on the sale felt ceremonial, a shedding of the physical space where I'd been imprisoned by manipulation and lies. Every room had been professionally cleaned, every trace of our life together erased. It was just walls and floors now. Architecture without memory. The real estate agent waited in her car, giving me privacy for this final goodbye. I walked through each room slowly, remembering not the false happiness Luke had crafted, but the gradual awakening that had saved me. The office where I'd found the shoebox, the kitchen where I'd maintained my performance, the bedroom where I'd lain awake planning my escape. My phone buzzed with a text from Vincent. "Thought you'd want to know. Luke was denied his appeal to reduce the IRS penalties. He's filing for bankruptcy." I typed back, "Thank you for the update." I felt nothing reading those words. Not satisfaction, not pity, just a mild interest in information about someone who no longer had power over me. Luke had become irrelevant, a cautionary tale I sometimes referenced when talking to women in domestic abuse support groups, but no longer a presence that occupied space in my emotional life. The house sold for significantly more than Luke and I had paid for it. After the divorce settlement split and paying off the remaining mortgage, I walked away with enough money to buy a modest condo near my sister's neighborhood and fund 2 years of graduate school. Luke, having declared bankruptcy and facing ongoing IRS garnishment of any future income, received his share and watched it immediately claimed by creditors and the federal government. My new condo was small but filled with light. My mother had helped me decorate, choosing colors Luke had never allowed because he found them too bold or unprofessional. My living room was painted deep teal. My bedroom featured a vibrant botanical wallpaper. Every choice was mine, unfiltered by someone else's need for control. Graduate school proved challenging and rewarding. My classes in clinical social work and trauma-informed care drew directly from my experience with Luke's systematic abuse. My professors recognized my passion for understanding coercive control, and several encouraged me to consider specializing in this area. During my second semester, I started volunteering at a local domestic violence shelter. The work was difficult, sitting with women whose stories echoed aspects of my own experience, but it was also healing, transforming my survival into service. One evening at the shelter, I met with a woman named Grace who'd recently left her husband after 15 years of isolation. She'd found my contact information through a support group, specifically requesting to speak with me after hearing about my story. "I keep thinking I should forgive him," Grace said during our session. "Everyone says holding on to anger isn't healthy, that I need to let it go and move on." "Forgiveness is personal," I replied carefully. "No one can tell you whether or when to forgive someone who abused you. But I'll tell you what I learned. You don't have to forgive someone to heal from what they did. You can acknowledge the harm, process the trauma, rebuild your life, and never grant them the absolution of forgiveness. That's valid too." "Did you forgive your ex-husband?" she asked directly. "No," I said without hesitation. "He stole a decade of my life. He kept me from saying goodbye to my dying father. He systematically destroyed my support network to maintain control. I don't forgive those actions, and I never will. But I'm also not carrying around anger about him anymore. He's simply not worth the emotional energy." Grace nodded slowly. "People act like holding him accountable makes me bitter. But I'm not bitter. I'm just clear about what he did." "Exactly," I agreed. "There's a difference between bitter rumination and clear-eyed acknowledgement of harm. You can be healed and happy while still maintaining boundaries against someone who hurt you." This conversation repeated in various forms with different women over the months that followed. The shelter director, noting my effectiveness with clients, offered me a paid position after graduation. I accepted immediately. My family remained central to my rebuilt life. Sunday dinners had become tradition, rotating between my mother's house, my sister's home, and my condo. My nephew had started calling me for homework help, and little Anna had begun asking when Aunt Anna would take her to the zoo like I'd promised. Sarah and I had reclaimed our friendship, though we both acknowledged it was different now. A decade apart had changed us both, but the foundation remained, and we were building something new on top of it. She'd become one of my closest confidants, someone who understood the complexity of reclaiming a life after coercive control. Quinn and I maintained regular contact. She'd built a successful graphic design business in Seattle and had started dating someone who, by all accounts, respected her boundaries and independence. "I'm not sure I'll ever marry again," she admitted during one phone call. "Luke did too much damage to my ability to trust that deeply." "That's completely valid," I assured her. "There's no right way to move forward. You get to define what healing looks like for you." "How about you?" she asked. "Are you dating?" "Not yet," I replied. "Maybe eventually, but right now, I'm focused on work and family." and rebuilding connections that Luke destroyed. Romance feels secondary to that. The truth was more complicated than I admitted to Quinn. I'd met someone, a fellow graduate student named James, who'd asked me out twice. I'd declined both times, not out of lack of interest, but because I recognized I wasn't ready. The work of untangling Luke's conditioning took time, and I refused to bring unresolved trauma into a new relationship. One afternoon in late fall, almost 2 years after the Thanksgiving dinner that had exposed Luke, I received an unexpected letter. The return address showed a prison in Michigan, and the sender's name was unfamiliar: Robert Chen, serving time for fraud. Inside, the letter explained that Robert had been Luke's cellmate for 2 months before Luke's release after serving 6 months for tax evasion. "Your ex-husband talked about you constantly," Robert wrote, "not with remorse, but with resentment. He blamed you for his downfall, claimed you destroyed his life over misunderstandings, and he said you'd turned his family against him, cost him his career, ruined his reputation. I'm writing because he mentioned plans to make things right when he got out. He seemed fixated on the idea that he could win you back if he just explained things properly. I thought you should know." I immediately contacted Helena, my divorce attorney. She filed for a restraining order extension and notified the police about the potential threat. Vincent did a check on Luke's current situation and reported back within days. "He's living in a trailer park 2 hours away," Vincent said, "working part-time at a warehouse, still under IRS garnishment that takes most of his wages, driving a 15-year-old car that barely runs. His appearance has deteriorated significantly. He's aged about 20 years in the past 2. Has he tried to contact me or my family?" I asked. "Not yet, but the prison cellmate's warning has merit. Luke's social media posts suggest he's built a victim narrative where you're the villain who destroyed an innocent man. He's found a small online community of men who claim they've been falsely accused by vengeful wives. The information was concerning, but not surprising. Men like Luke rarely accepted responsibility for their actions. They found echo chambers that reinforced their victimhood and vilified anyone who held them accountable. The extended restraining order was granted immediately. Judge Martinez, who'd overseen our divorce, reviewed Robert Chen's letter and Vincent's report before issuing strong warnings about the consequences of any violation. "If Luke Walsh attempts any contact with you or your family," she said firmly during the brief hearing, "he'll face immediate arrest and prosecution. Make sure everyone in your circle knows to document any approach and contact law enforcement immediately." I left the courthouse feeling secure in the protections in place, but Vincent suggested additional precautions. New security cameras were installed at my condo. My family received panic buttons that connected directly to police dispatch. Sarah's husband, Rick, set up GPS tracking on my phone that my mother and sister could access. "We're not going to let him hurt you again," my mother said fiercely. "Not physically, not emotionally, not in any way." Months passed without incident. Luke remained in his trailer park, working his warehouse job, living a life of such diminished circumstances that it seemed punishment enough without direct contact. My therapist helped me process the lingering anxiety about his potential approach. "You built a support network he can't penetrate," she reminded me. "You have legal protections, physical security, and people watching out for you. More importantly, you have the clarity and strength to recognize manipulation when you see it. You're not the isolated woman you were 2 years ago." My graduate school work continued to flourish. I'd started writing a thesis on coercive control in intimate partnerships, using my own experience as a case study while protecting identities. My advisor believed the work could be published and might contribute meaningfully to the field. The shelter promoted me to lead counselor for their long-term resident program. The work involved helping women who'd left abusive situations rebuild their lives systematically, addressing everything from financial literacy to recognizing healthy relationship patterns. Many of the skills I taught came directly from my own reconstruction process. One client, a woman named Iris who'd spent 12 years with a controlling partner, asked me during a session, "When does it stop hurting? When do you stop being angry about the time you lost?" "I don't know if the hurt ever completely stops," I answered honestly. "There are still moments when I think about my father's funeral, and I feel this grief that takes my breath away." Or I'll see my nephew do something and realize I missed his entire early childhood. Those losses don't disappear. So it never gets better? She asked, disappointed. It gets different, I clarified. The acute pain fades. The anger becomes less consuming. And gradually, you build a life that's so full and meaningful that the past takes up less space. You don't forget what happened, but you stop letting it define your present. Iris nodded thoughtfully. Did you ever want revenge beyond what you did? Did you ever think about doing something more? The revenge I took was making sure he faced every possible consequence for his actions, I said. He lost his career, his money, his reputation, his freedom. He spent 6 months in prison and will spend years under financial monitoring. He can't work in his field ever again. Every person who once admired him knows the truth about what he did. That's not nothing. But do you wish you'd done more? She pressed. I considered the question carefully. Sometimes I imagine scenarios where he suffered more dramatically. But then I remember that those fantasies don't actually serve me. They keep me connected to him psychologically. The real revenge is building a life so good that he becomes completely irrelevant to my happiness. This became my philosophy for moving forward. Luke's diminished circumstances were consequence enough. My energy belonged to the women I counseled, the family I'd reclaimed, the career I was building, and the life I was intentionally constructing. 3 years after the divorce, I received my clinical social work license. My mother, sister, nephew, and little Anna attended the small ceremony. Sarah brought sparkling cider and a cake decorated with MSW in elaborate frosting letters. Your father would have framed this certificate, my mother said, crying happy tears. He always knew you'd do something important. That evening, alone in my condo, I thought about the journey from Luke's isolated prisoner to licensed clinician. The transformation hadn't been linear or easy. There had been setbacks and nightmares and days when the weight of what I'd lost felt unbearable. But I'd survived. More than survived, I'd become someone who could help others survive too. Luke had tried to make me small and powerless, and I'd responded by becoming strong enough to dismantle his entire constructed reality. My phone showed a notification from the shelter. A new client had requested to meet with me specifically, having heard about my background with coercive control. I confirmed the appointment for the following morning, adding it to a calendar that was full of purpose and connection. Looking around my small, bright condo with its bold colors and comfortable furniture, I felt something I hadn't experienced in the house Luke had chosen. Genuine contentment. This space was mine. This life was mine. The relationships I'd rebuilt were authentic, built on truth rather than manipulation. Luke existed somewhere, living consequences I'd set in motion, but he existed at such a distance from my daily reality that he might as well be fictional. His power over me had evaporated the moment I'd stood in our dining room distributing evidence packets to his colleagues. I'd promised myself that night I'd take everything from him the way he'd taken everything from me. I'd kept that promise, and in doing so, I'd discovered that the opposite of Luke's prison wasn't just freedom. It was purpose. It was using my survival to help others escape their own prisons. It was transforming pain into power, isolation into connection, manipulation into truth. The woman Luke had tried to break had become someone he couldn't have imagined. Independent, strong, clear-eyed about abuse, and completely immune to the tactics he'd once used to maintain control. That was the ultimate revenge. The kind that lasted long after criminal charges and financial penalties had been satisfied. I'd become someone he couldn't touch, couldn't manipulate, couldn't hurt, and I'd helped dozens of other women do the same. Luke's legacy wasn't the successful career and perfect marriage he'd tried to project. His legacy was the network of survivors who'd learned from his tactics and knew how to recognize them in others. Standing at my window, watching the sunset paint my neighborhood in gold and amber, I felt the weight of the past finally settle into something manageable. Not forgotten, not forgiven, but integrated. Luke's shadow had shrunk to its proper size, no longer looming over every aspect of my existence. The life I'd built from the ruins of his manipulation was better than anything I'd had before. Stronger, clearer, more authentic. He'd thought isolation would make me dependent. Instead, it had taught me the value of genuine connection. He'd thought control would make me compliant. Instead, it had taught me the importance of boundaries and autonomy. Tomorrow I'd meet with a new client who needed help escaping her own Luke. I'd share what I'd learned, offer the resources I'd discovered, and help her begin planning her own path to freedom. This was my life now, turning my worst experience into someone else's hope. And Luke? Luke was irrelevant. A closed chapter, a lesson I'd learned and moved beyond. He'd tried to define my story, and I'd responded by writing a completely different ending than he'd planned. That was revenge enough.